What would you do if the VP's son, young, arrogant, and drunk on inherited power, looked you in the eye and called you an imbecile? Before firing you on the spot, would you break down, fight back, walk away silently? For Rachel Monroe, a calm, brilliant strategist who spent a decade saving the company from collapse after collapse, that moment wasn't an ending, it was a spark. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, she just smiled, because she remembered one tiny clause in her contract that could unravel everything he thought he controlled. But here's the question. What happens when someone quietly loyal holds more power than the people who try to erase her? This is not a revenge story. It's a reclamation. A story of quiet strength, invisible labor, boardroom politics, and the moment a woman stops apologizing for being the one who always saved the day. Ready to find out what the VP's son forgot to read? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. I remember the taste of my coffee that morning. Just the right hint of cinnamon and almond milk, the way I liked it warm, steady, comforting. The office was quiet, the kind of hush that settles before people bring their chaos in with them. I had arrived early, as always. I liked the stillness before the noise. It gave me space to think. My name tag still sat slightly crooked on the glass door. Rachel Monroe, Senior Director of Strategic Development. 10 years of loyalty and grit behind that title, even if few ever said it out loud. I had 3 meetings lined up that morning, one with a client from London, another with a cross-functional team for a product relaunch, and a final prep call for the Varden deal, the one I had been working on for 5 months. It was the kind of Monday that was going to demand my full attention. I wasn't worried. I'd done this for a decade. Then came the tap on my desk. "Rachel," a voice said flatly. I looked up, blinking. Ethan Caldwell, crisp haircut, power suit, expensive-smelling cologne. He stood like someone playing a role, shoulders back, jaw set, but eyes that darted too quickly. He was 32, newly returned from his MBA at Wharton, the son of Martin Caldwell, our company's vice president, and as of last week, acting VP of strategy. Acting as in temporary, you're needed in the conference room, he said, already turning. "Is this about Varden?" I asked. Confused. We weren't scheduled to meet until he didn't answer. He was already walking away. A pit bloomed in my stomach. I followed, half in disbelief, half in curiosity. I had a dozen thoughts flashing through my head. Maybe something changed in the client brief. Maybe he wanted to realign messaging, but when I entered the room, I knew. There were 2 junior HR associates sitting awkwardly at the end of the long conference table, fidgeting with their pens. Ethan stood at the whiteboard, arms folded like a CEO in a movie. He didn't ask me to sit, didn't offer coffee, didn't even nod. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "This department needs new energy, a sharper, more agile approach to strategy." I felt my pulse start to race. "You're letting me go?" I asked. He nodded, effective immediately. I waited for the explanation that would justify this, but instead, he said it. "We just don't have room for imbeciles in leadership." The word hit me like a slap. Imbeciles. 10 years, global expansions, their crisis negotiations, hundreds of hours in boardrooms saving deals that had already gone sideways. And that's the word he chose. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The HR reps looked away, visibly uncomfortable. My body moved before my brain did. I stood, nodded once and whispered, "Understood." No drama, no begging, no defense, but something in me cracked. Packing my things felt like watching someone else's life fall apart. No one said anything, not openly, but I saw it in their eyes. Confusion, sympathy, fear. If I could be discarded this easily, what did it mean for everyone else? By 10:20 I was gone. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the building I had helped build. It looked different now, cold, small. But even as the sting settled into my chest, a strange thought surfaced. He didn't read it. I didn't even know where the idea came from, but the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. Ethan wasn't there when we negotiated the NovaCorp clause. He didn't sit in on those closed-door sessions after our company nearly imploded from a botched partnership deal 2 years ago. He wasn't in the room when Martin, his father, looked me dead in the eye and said, "From now on, any major account goes through you. I need it in writing." And so we did. A clause was added to my contract. Quiet, legal, binding. I didn't brag about it. I didn't need to. I just kept doing my job. And now the one person who didn't know about it had just fired me. 24 hours before the Varden contract was scheduled to close, the one I was solely authorized to sign, I stared at my phone, half expecting it to ring. It didn't, not yet. But it would, and when it did, I wasn't sure if I'd answer, because what I felt wasn't revenge, it wasn't even anger, it was clarity. For the first time in a long while, I realized just how replaceable I had allowed myself to become in other people's eyes because I made things work silently, efficiently, without needing applause. But the silence had protected them, not me. That was about to change. I barely slept that night. It wasn't that I was heartbroken or furious. It was something stranger. Like I was holding my breath without knowing why, something unsettled, unfinished. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spin in slow circles, replaying the words Ethan said like a broken loop in my mind. "We don't have room for imbeciles." It should have crushed me, but instead, all I could think was, he really doesn't know. Because 2 years ago, after the NovaCorp disaster nearly cost the company its largest partnership, I was called into a private meeting with Martin Caldwell. I remembered every word. I trusted the wrong people. He had said, his voice low, his eyes heavier than I'd ever seen them. And we almost paid for it with the company. I had been the one who stepped in, the one who restructured the deal overnight, rewrote half the legal language, and got the client back on board after an overzealous junior manager had fumbled negotiations. And Martin knew it. "I need to protect our future," he'd said that day. "I need to protect you." So he added it to my contract. Any deal exceeding $10 million had to be reviewed, negotiated, and signed by me, exclusively. Not even he could override it without my signature. At the time, it felt like an act of trust. Now, it felt like a loaded weapon. At 8:04 the next morning, my phone rang, a unknown number. I stared at it for 3 rings, then picked up. "Rachel, it's Martin Caldwell." His voice was rushed, tired, almost brittle, like someone trying to hold a house together during an earthquake. "I just walked into the office," he said. "Your desk is empty." Silence. "Rachel, what the hell happened?" I paused for a beat. I wanted to measure every syllable. "Your son fired me," I said calmly. Another silence, this one longer. I could hear him rifling through papers, maybe pulling up my employment file. "When yesterday morning, told me I was an imbecile, said the department needed new energy." Something slammed in the background. "Did he even read your contract?" Martin asked, almost to himself. I closed my eyes. I don't think he did. His breathing changed. "You're the only person authorized to finalize the Varden deal." "I know." I could hear it in his voice now, the unraveling. "He thought he could replace you with a team of analysts." Martin muttered. He thought experience was just optional. He cursed under his breath. Then he said it, mostly to himself. His hands are going to shake when he reads that clause. After he hung up, I sat alone in my living room. I didn't touch my coffee. I didn't check email. I just sat there, the silence loud, the weight of 10 years of service pressing into my chest like a quiet ache. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was aware. There's a kind of power in watching someone mistake your stillness for weakness. And Ethan had, from the moment he walked in, flashing credentials and borrowed confidence, he assumed I was dispensable, invisible. He thought I'd leave quietly and never look back. He didn't know that I had outgrown quiet. 6 months ago, while Ethan was still learning buzzwords and trying to impress investors with flashy charts, I was in 2 time zones negotiating with Varden's executive board. I built the relationship from scratch, worked weekends, took red-eye flights, got the legal teams to cooperate. Every line of that deal had my name imprinted between the words. And now, the only person who could finalize the contract was me. Not his team, not Ethan, just me. And he fired me. I sat with that irony for a long while, not with satisfaction, but with stillness. It didn't feel good, not yet. It felt like a pause before the next breath. A breath I would take on my terms. By 9:06 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, I let it ring. 9:08, another one. Reception, ignored. 9:12, an email. I opened it. Subject urgent, Varden meeting access from Ethan, Caldwell Clear Path Strategies, come Rachel. There appears to have been a miscommunication regarding your current employment status. We would appreciate it if you could join today's Varden call at 11:00 a.m. to help facilitate final steps. Please confirm ASAP, Ethan. No apology, no explanation, just a request dressed up like an order. I stared at the screen for a long time, expressionless. Then I clicked reply. Ethan, I will attend the meeting only under the conditions outlined in my contract. I suggest you review it before 11. Rachel, click, send, surgical. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again, and this time I answered. Rachel, Martin said, his voice tight. He still doesn't get it. I know, I replied. He's scrambling. Legal just flagged the clause. I stayed quiet. Then came the moment I was waiting for. Will you help us salvage this? There it was. The ask. I didn't respond right away. I looked out the window instead, the morning light slanting across my floorboards. For a moment, I didn't feel like a strategist or a director or an employee. I felt like a person who had carried too much for too long. I'll help, I said finally. But I'm not doing it as a favor. I understand. No. Martin, I said, I don't think you do. If I walk into that boardroom today, I want everything in writing. I want my authority respected. And I want Ethan nowhere near the negotiation table. There was a pause. Agreed. And Martin. Yes. This is the last time I fix someone else's mess without a title to match the responsibility. Another pause. Then fair enough. I stood up from the couch and walked to the closet. I didn't choose comfort clothes. I chose power. A navy suit, subtle earrings, hair tied back like a blade. By 10:42 a.m., I walked through the doors of the office like I had never left. People stared. The receptionist blinked, almost spilled her coffee. I thought you... Not quite, I said, offering a calm smile, and I didn't stop walking. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt different that day. It wasn't the silence that unnerved me. I'd always preferred silence. It was the eyes. The way conversations paused when I stepped out. The way heads turned ever so slightly before quickly looking away. As if I had come back from something. Or worse, come back to finish something. I didn't acknowledge anyone. I didn't need to. The energy in the room did all the speaking. At exactly 10:58 a.m., I entered conference room 7B, the same room where I had been dismissed just 48 hours earlier. This time, I didn't wait to be invited. I walked in, placed my binder on the table, and began organizing the presentation materials, my materials that Ethan had planned to present himself. A few people tried not to make eye contact. Others simply nodded, unsure whether to smile or stay neutral. At 11:00 sharp, the Varden team joined via video. Faces flickered on screen, executives in suits, glasses reflecting blue light, voices professional but familiar. I led the conversation. The deal closed without a single hiccup, not one, and Ethan. He wasn't in the room, not even a shadow. When the meeting ended, the silence in the room lingered like steam after a storm. People began gathering their laptops, shuffling papers, standing slowly. No one said it, but they all knew I had just pulled off a rescue operation. Martin sat across the table, fingers steepled, face unreadable. You saved us, he said quietly. No. I replied, I saved the deal. Saving the company might take a little longer. He gave a slow nod, and I left the room without looking back. Ethan was in the hallway, leaning against the wall, phone in hand, pretending to be busy. He looked up as I passed, expression unreadable, something between shame and defiance. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. I just kept walking. But I knew better than to think it was over. By Thursday, things began to shift, not openly. There were no confrontations, no explosions, but the energy changed. The warmth in hallway greetings cooled. Slack messages that once ended in emojis now landed flat. And every time I entered a room, it got just a little too quiet. At first, I thought I was imagining it, until I noticed a spreadsheet one I had finalized for the finance team had 2 data points altered, subtly. Not enough to crash anything, just enough to make me look careless. Then came the email. It appeared to come from my account, a misfiled invoice sent to a client with the wrong routing number, harmless on its own. But if it hadn't been flagged, it would have delayed payments for an entire quarter. I never sent it. Worse, I never even opened that invoice. I went straight to the internal systems team. I need access logs. I told them. One of the younger engineers, a quiet guy named Aaron, looked up from his monitor, concerned. "You're not the first person to ask about this," he said in a low voice. "There's been activity." What kind of activity? Logan overrides. Sessions tied to senior-level IDs, files modified, emails redirected, but nothing with clear fingerprints? I narrowed my eyes, and nothing escalated. "We've submitted alerts," he said, hesitating, "but unless there's hard proof, leadership tends to dismiss it as noise. I'll get proof." I said. He gave me a cautious look. "Be careful." That night, I stayed late. The floor was mostly empty. The hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional creak of the air vents, and the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard were the only sounds. I sat in the corner conference room, blinds drawn halfway, combing through digital logs, timestamps, access trails. I matched logins against physical badge swipes. I cross-referenced file edits with calendar invites and Slack activity. And slowly, a pattern emerged. It wasn't random. Whoever was doing this knew exactly what they were trying to build: a narrative. A quiet one. Rachel Monroe disorganized, slipping, maybe not as sharp as she used to be. And the edits, the misplaced messages. All of it lined up perfectly with upcoming performance reviews, key team decisions, and most importantly, the role that Martin had hinted at offering me officially. Someone wanted me to look unstable before that promotion became permanent. I didn't need to guess who. The next morning, I passed Ethan in the hallway. He was talking to 2 interns, laughing too loud, telling some story about strategy frameworks that didn't exist 6 months ago. When he saw me, he smiled. "Rachel," he said, faux warm, "glad you're still with us. You know how we love giving second chances." I paused, then smiled back. "Hope you've read the new clauses in your contract." His smirk faltered. I kept walking. That afternoon, I booked a 10-minute meeting with Martin. No assistant, no preamble. I walked into his office and shut the door behind me. "I need you to see something," I said, handing him a printed packet. It was a thick stack of screenshots, annotated logs, file comparisons, access anomalies, all neatly organized and color-coded. "This isn't negligence," I said. "This is sabotage." He read quietly. His jaw clenched halfway through. His thumb stopped tapping. "Who else has seen this?" he asked finally. "Only Aaron from IT." Martin leaned back in his chair. I wanted to believe he'd grow into this. He murmured, "He's angry." I said, "He knows he failed. Now he's trying to take control the only way he knows how." Martin looked at me for a long moment. "What do you want?" "An audit. Internal, quiet. Start today. You'll get it," he said. "And Rachel, this won't happen again. Not to you. Not under my watch." I wanted to believe him, but power doesn't shift because someone promises it will. Power shifts when someone refuses to go back to silence, and I was done being quiet. The audit began quietly, almost invisibly. No internal memos, no announcements. Just a few new faces with government-grade laptops and soft-soled shoes moving through departments like they were shadowing cross-functional teams. But everyone knew. You could feel it in the way people looked over their shoulders before speaking, or paused a second too long before hitting send. The office didn't buzz anymore. It watched. I kept my head down. Let the silence do the work. No accusations, no outbursts, just the steady weight of knowing something others didn't and waiting for it to surface. On Monday morning, a man named David Linwood introduced himself to me. Audit consultant, sharp-eyed, clean-cut, late 40s. His presence felt surgical precise, neutral, and hard to read. We've traced several irregular login patterns, he said, clicking through a secure tablet, each tied to files or messages used to question your performance. I nodded. I had seen most of it already. But here's where it gets interesting. He continued, none of the access points trace back to your device? My eyes narrowed. They came from machines in the visitor lounge and one tied to the VP assistant's terminal. I didn't move. Ethan's assistant, I asked carefully. David didn't confirm, but he didn't deny it either. Why would someone else use my credentials? They didn't, he said. They used admin override codes, someone with deep access permissions. They impersonated your sessions without leaving a direct trace. I felt a slow, cold wave crawl down my spine. It wasn't sloppy sabotage. It was calculated, designed to be just believable enough, just enough digital fingerprints to raise questions, but not enough to raise alarms, enough to cast doubt, to wear me down, to break me in half from the inside out. That night, I walked the floors alone again. The conference rooms were empty. The walls echoed. I sat in the corner of 6A with my laptop, a legal pad, and a second cup of coffee I wasn't drinking. I reviewed everything again, documents, timestamps, login records, and started mapping it across personnel changes, promotion dates, and internal transfer announcements. The same pattern kept repeating. Every mistake made under my name coincided with someone else angling for a title I had never officially received. And every one of those people had, at some point, reported to Ethan. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I sat with it, because I knew how this game worked. They don't come for you with torches. They come with whispered doubt, with performance flags, with concerns during promotion cycles, and if you don't catch it in time, they write you out of the future before you even know you're on the chopping block. Not this time. On Tuesday, I passed Ethan again. He was alone this time. Sitting by the break room window, scrolling on his phone, he looked up as I passed. Rachel, he said, voice smooth. How's the audit going? I hope it's not too invasive. I paused. He wanted to appear unbothered, like none of it touched him. I walked closer, just enough to make him uncomfortable. I'm not the one who should be worried. His smile twitched. Is that a threat? No. I said, it's a fact. Then I walked away. I didn't look back. That evening, David messaged me. We'd like you to attend the preliminary findings presentation tomorrow morning. 10:00 a.m. Executive boardroom. It's confidential. I stared at the message for a moment. Something inside me flickered. Not fear, not triumph. Something deeper. Reluctance. Because I knew what was coming. And part of me didn't want it. Not like this. I had spent my entire career trying to do things right. With grace. With dignity. I wasn't someone who played political chess. I just worked harder. Showed up. Did the job. But apparently, that wasn't enough anymore. The boardroom was cold when I arrived the next day. Floor-to-ceiling glass. 12 leather chairs. The city stretching beyond the skyline like it hadn't noticed any of this was happening. David and his team sat at the far end of the table, laptops open, data already pulled up. Martin stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. 10 years ago, I would have sat quietly, waited for permission to speak. Today, I took the seat at the center of the table. Ethan arrived 10 minutes late. Of course he did. Coffee in hand, sunglasses on his collar, navy blazer tailored a little too tight across his shoulders. He nodded at no one, sat down like the meeting was his. David began. Timeline of events, access logs, patterns of behavior. Then, slide by slide, he painted the full picture: every override login, every falsified edit, every document changed during off hours from non-registered terminals, and then came the heat map. A visual of activity clustered around executive floor machines, one name attached to all of it: Ethan Caldwell. The room went still. Ethan laughed, loud, sharp. "That proves nothing," he said, scoffing. "Everyone knows I use multiple terminals." David didn't blink. "You accessed override protocols tied to Rachel Monroe's ID. You also deleted the edit history on 3 high-level reports during promotion season." Ethan turned to Martin. "You're seriously going to believe this?" "She's just bitter. She got fired." I sat up straighter. "I wasn't bitter when you fired me. Ethan, I wasn't even bitter when you tried to rewrite my work as yours." But now I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it in the center of the table. Logs, backups, notes, a second paper trail. Now his hand started to shake. Martin leaned forward, voice low. "Did you sabotage her?" Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. "This is insane." He muttered. "You compromised the company's integrity." Martin said, every word a stone. "You're suspended," he added, "effective immediately." Ethan stood, stunned. No one moved. He looked around the room like someone searching for a life raft in a sinking ship, but no one reached for him. He left without a word, and the office exhaled. Afterward, I stood alone by the window. Martin approached quietly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I gave him too much power, without enough oversight." I nodded once. "I don't want an apology." He looked confused. "I want change." I said, and I meant it. The office felt different the next day. Not quieter, not tenser, just suspended, and like everyone was waiting for something to break. Ethan's desk sat empty, the nameplate still in place like a placeholder for denial. People passed by it the way you pass a wreck on the highway, too fast to stare, too slow to ignore. No one said his name, but they didn't have to. We all knew what happened. We all knew who made it happen. That morning, I found a small envelope on my desk. No logo, no return address, just my first name written in quick, messy cursive. Inside was a single note. "Thank you for standing up. Some of us have been afraid to. You gave us courage." No signature. It took me longer than I expected to fold the paper, longer still to place it in the back pocket of the black leather notebook I'd carried every day during the audit. It wasn't just documentation now. It was memory, evidence, armor. Around noon, Martin called me into his office. His posture had changed, less sharp, more human. He gestured for me to sit. No speeches, no dramatics. We finalized Ethan's departure with the board. He said. I nodded. No surprise there. He hesitated. "We're keeping it internal. No press, no statements, just a quiet exit." I studied him for a long beat. "Because he's your son." He didn't flinch. "Yes. But also because this company doesn't need a scandal. We need healing." I didn't respond. I wanted to ask. "And after healing, what comes next?" He answered anyway. "Rebuilding," he said. "And I want you to be part of that. Officially." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside a formal offer letter, Executive Director of Strategic Development. A title that finally reflected the responsibility I had carried for years in silence. "You've earned this 100 times over," he said. "But I want to make sure the power comes with the name this time. No more shadows, no more footnotes. Just you exactly where you belong." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt relief. Relief that I didn't have to explain myself anymore. That I didn't have to defend my worth with metrics or emails or sleepless nights. That I didn't have to keep proving something I had already proven over and over. I breathed in, then out. "I'll accept." I said, "But I want something in return." "Name it. A new protocol." I said, "For internal reporting. Anonymous submissions. Escalation procedures that don't rely on hierarchy. I want a system that protects people like me, like us, when the power dynamics fail." He nodded slowly. "Done." That afternoon, I sent an email to my department. Subject line: a fresh start, team. I know the past few weeks have been heavy. Thank you for showing up. Even when things felt uncertain, my goal moving forward is simple: to create a space where leadership means accountability, not intimidation. If you have concerns, ideas, or frustrations, my door is open. Let's rebuild this together. Within an hour, I had 17 replies. Not complaints, not gossip, suggestion, encouragement, your gratitude, even humor. The silence that had once wrapped itself around this company like insulation had finally cracked, and something real was starting to seep through. That evening, I stayed late to finish onboarding tasks. As I packed up, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a blocked number. I hesitated before pressing play. Rachel. It's Ethan. His voice was softer than I remembered. Fragile, uneven. I know you probably don't care, and you don't owe me anything. But I wanted to say, I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was trying to prove myself. To my dad, to the board. I thought if I could just take control, it would make everything work. A long pause. You were right. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't read anything. I just assumed I knew better. I'm leaving the state, starting over. Anyway, good luck, so you deserve it. I stood there for a long time after the message ended, not angry, not vindicated, just still. I didn't hate him. That was the strangest part. He had tried to erase me, tried to poison my reputation, tried to dismantle everything I had built with a few clever edits and power plays. But in doing so, he had also forced me to fight for myself. Louder, stronger, clearer, not for revenge, for truth, for dignity. 2 weeks passed. The energy in the building softened, not to what it had been before, but to something better. People spoke up in meetings. Junior staff didn't whisper their ideas anymore. Mistakes weren't used as leverage. It was subtle, but real. And on the morning when my new title became official, I didn't throw a party. I didn't post about it online. I didn't even tell my family. I just printed the offer letter, signed it, and slid it into the drawer where I had once hidden the folder that proved I wasn't crazy. That drawer now held a different kind of proof. Not that I had survived, but that I had become unerasable. The weather had turned. It was the kind of soft gray day where the city slowed down just a little and people moved more quietly. I like days like that. The noise in my own head always felt softer when the sky matched it. I met Martin in the glass-walled boardroom around 3 years ago PMC, the same room where Ethan once tried to present the Varden deal without even understanding who had built it. Now it was just the two of us. He carried a folder. He always did. I've drafted a proposal. He said, I'd like you to review it before next week's meeting. He slid it across the table. I opened it. The cover page read, Initiative the Monroe Framework. I blinked. You're naming it after me, I asked. Stunned. It was the board's idea, he said. You've become the example of what it means to lead through adversity and do it without losing your integrity. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The words on the page blurred slightly before coming back into focus. Rachel, Martin added gently. I know this doesn't undo what happened, and I know it doesn't erase the years you spent being passed over, undervalued, but I hope this is a start. I nodded. It was more than a start. It was a foundation. That weekend, I took a walk through my old neighborhood. I passed the narrow alley where I used to park my secondhand Civic, the tiny grocery store that once carried exactly 5 brands of cereal, all of them generic, the one-bedroom apartment where I stayed up until 2 were ma'am, working on slide decks for meetings I wouldn't even be invited to attend. I paused outside the old bookstore, 10 years ago. I sat on that bench after being passed over for a promotion. I had trained the person who got the job. I remember reading rejection emails over and over, wondering what I had missed, what I had lacked. Back then, I thought success was about proving people wrong. Now, I know better. Success is proving yourself right, that you were capable, that you did belong, that you deserved to be seen, heard, respected. It took a firestorm to make me say it out loud, but I said it, and I meant it, on Monday morning. I arrived at the office early and I liked the stillness. The quiet before the machine started humming and the coffee brewed in the break room, before everyone tried to look busier than they were. There was another note on my desk. No envelope, just folded paper and a familiar, hurried handwriting. I heard you got promoted. Some of us still talk about how you held the line when it mattered. Thank you for not letting him win. No name. It didn't need one. The message was clear. What I endured wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who had ever been made to feel small in a room they built. Everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough by someone who hadn't done half the work. Everyone who had been erased by louder voices, smoother resumes, and legacy titles. And maybe now they'd start to believe they didn't have to stay silent. Later that afternoon, I stood by the boardroom window, watching the city churn below taxis weaving, people rushing, lights blinking in and out like heartbeats. Everything looked the same. But I wasn't. I had learned something that no degree, no promotion, no executive presence workshop had ever taught me. That professionalism without boundaries is just self-sacrifice in a suit. That silence can protect you until it buries you. And that contracts aren't just paperwork, they're promises, written in ink. And sometimes the fine print they don't read is the very thing that saves you. I wasn't loud, I wasn't flashy, but I was consistent, I was prepared. I was the one they called when it mattered. Not because I demanded the spotlight, but because I had earned it. Every late night, every time I coached someone who leapfrogged me, every time I chose to stay calm when I wanted to scream, it had all led here. Not a revenge story, a reclamation story, a story of dignity, of worth, of power reclaimed not through fury, but through clarity. That night, I turned off the lights in my office. Just before I left, I opened the drawer that once held my evidence folder. Now, it held only the signed offer letter, proof that I was no longer disposable, not because someone told me I wasn't, but because I had made myself impossible to erase. Sometimes, the quietest people in the room are the ones holding everything together. Rachel Monroe never raised her voice. She didn't fight with fury, she fought with facts, with dignity, and with the kind of strength that comes from being overlooked too many times until she could no longer be ignored. Her story isn't just about one arrogant VP's son or a single unjust firing. It's about every woman who was called too soft while carrying the weight of broken systems. It's about every employee who stayed late, gave more, spoke less, and was still seen as replaceable. And it's a powerful reminder. Disrespect, favoritism, and quiet sabotage aren't just office politics. They're forms of discrimination that can destroy lives if left unchecked. So if Rachel's journey moved you, if it made you feel seen, or made you think of someone who deserves to be share, and subscribe to our channel, your voice helps stories like this reach the people who need to hear them. And stay with us because more stories of courage, justice, and transformation are just around the corner.